and Means Committee to order. We've got this. Chairman Martin, we've got this meeting room for 15 minutes. House Bill 482.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Since this bill's been heard twice in committee already, subcommittee, I'll be very brief. H482 is the Georgia Educational Scholarship Account. It's a bill designed to help our public school system by allowing students who are not performing well or thriving in the public school they are districted for to take the state portion of their funding, which amounts to about 53% of the total, and put the money in an account that's managed by the Department of Treasury to be strictly used for educational purposes such as tuition, textbooks, private tutoring, online learning, transportation, etc. The bill gives priority to students from low-income families, students who have been adopted out of foster care, students of active military parents, students with special needs, and students who have a documented case of bullying. This bill will improve the academic outcomes for all Georgia's students.
Are there questions? Hearing none, what is the pleasure? There's a motion and a second to pass. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? No. The ayes have it. Moves on to rules.
Thank you, sir.
House Bill 793. Dominic LaRicchia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is, I'm not going to do the aquarium portion, if that's all right. That was the one that was passed out of this full committee, sent to rules, and came back to add the museum portion.
What if we've changed our mind?
Okay, I can do it again for you.
Do it quick.
Okay, just the museum portion is, the aquarium? Okay, the aquarium, we just moved the sunset to do a $100 million expansion for the Predator Marine Life exhibit. It actually just moves a sunset for a sales tax exemption on construction materials that we have given the aquarium a number of times. It does raise the cap to $4.5 million because it's a $100 million expansion. About $50 million of that is going to be the construction materials. And it moves the sunset from it moves it starting 2018, July 1 to December the 31st of 2022. And so that's the aquarium portion. And then the part that was added by Chairman Battles is the museum in Bartow County, I believe Cartersville. That's a $30 million investment into an auto museum. It is capped at $960,000, I believe, on that sales tax exemption, and the locals have some buy-in on some tax exemption for that project. It's a $30 million investment, and so that would be the same thing. You're just exempting the sales and use tax on the construction materials. Both of those, the aquarium and the museum, have to do a sales and use tax refund. They do not get to appreciate that at the point of purchase.
Are there questions? 12.
Well, I don't want to belay the point here, but I can't get the bill to come up on my screen, but this is a place with the aquarium where it was like 2015 to 2017, and what we're doing here is we're replacing both of those dates with two new dates. My fear is that, and it may not, because this is a captive audience, but if after this bill passes, if one applies for a refund and that's changed in statutory law at the time, then refunds between those 2 days would no longer be available for refund. Now, if the gentleman's sure they've applied for all the refunds they're going to apply for in this closed system, that's not a problem. But if we change the dates the way you're doing it, as soon as this bill is approved, then refunds for that previous period would no longer be available by law.
Right, those are over. When you do a sales and use tax refund in that time frame, those receipts and invoices have to be dated within those within that window of time. And if there was a period of time where you made purchases between,
But the refund can be done up to 3 years after that, and we're still in that period. If you're telling me they've done all their refunds or will have done all of them by the effective date of this bill, then there's not a problem.
well, the fact that they're capped should help with that, because they'll get to use it either on one that they missed, if that's what you're saying, or it's still capped at the 960,000 on the museum and the 4.5 million on the aquarium.
I'll get with the revenue department.
Are there other questions? What's the pleasure of the committee? All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Moves back to rules.
Thank you.
All right, next, House Bill 840.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This one also went through subcommittee, so if you recollect, two or 3 years ago, I passed a bill. I live in an area where there's a lot of military presence. The 75th Ranger Battalion is the Hunter Army Airfield, as long as most of the aviation facilities for the 3rd Infantry Division. I found out from some of the Rangers they were going back and forth to Iraq and Afghanistan on a pretty regular basis. Most of them were single, and several of them had problems when they came back because their tags had expired on the vehicles, and they were required to pay a 10% late fee. We gave them, the bill at that time gave them 60 days to pay it without having to pay the fee. This bill, as a result of the first one, I've gotten some commentary from some of the pilots and crew from the C-130s at the 165th Airlift Command. They go over there for 6 months at a time, and many of them are commercial pilots, but some of them are small business owners. And if they have a really small business and they're over there and they don't pay their license fees on time, they can get as much as a 15% penalty. All this does is avoid that penalty for 60 days upon the return, as long as they present proof that they were in a war zone as dedicated by the executive order of the President of the United States. The state or the county loses no money. They get their tax money. They just have 60 days from the time they come back from the combat zone to pay it.
Are there questions? I presume there are no questions. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Moves on to rules. All right, Sam Watson, we're coming to you, House Resolution 238.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I bring before you H.R. 238. This is LC 440780S. We brought this bill back to change from 75%. The fiscal note was based off of 75%.
Wait just a minute. We're operating off of LC 440787.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's right. That's correct. We're changing 75% to 0.75% of all state revenues. The original fiscal note was based off a survey, so we were using the survey to come up with the calculations there. We cannot do that, so therefore we're going to be taking 0.75% of all state sales and use tax to fund this, to come up with these monies.
But the fiscal impact's the same, correct?
Fiscal, the math is the same. 0.75 is $40 million of total sales tax.
Are there questions? Any questions? Motion to pass. Is there a second? Motion and second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Moves on to rules.
All right, thank you.
Allen Peak, House Bill 849.
Just present from here?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if that's okay. HB 849 was a partnership audit bill. Current federal law was just recently changed. It now allows audited partnerships to pay the federal audit tax liabilities on behalf of their partners to ease administration. If our law is not changed, then our partnership in Georgia, when audited, The partnership itself cannot act on behalf of the partners. Instead, each partner will have to act on their own behalf and will be extremely burdensome to both the partners and the Department of Revenue. And so this bill provides that a partnership in Georgia can act directly when they are audited through the use of a state partnership representative. Gets us in line with what will now be current federal law as well, too. I'll answer any questions, Mr. Chairman, if there
All
are.
right, are there questions? This is actually a bill that we started last year, Chairman Knight, isn't it correct? And then we had to back off because the federal government wasn't quite ready for the audit requirements? Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions? What's the pleasure of the committee? All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moves on to rules.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
House Bill 820, Beth Beskin.
Hello again, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I have here today substitute to House Bill 820, LC 345369 ERS. This is a bill which will fix a problem we had in Fulton County last year that resulted from tax assessments. It went up dramatically. 20% of people experienced assessments that went up by more than 50%. In response to that and a public outcry, last summer, the Fulton County Board of Commissioners froze the tax digest for 2017 at a 2016 level on the basis of an 1881 statute. The Commissioner of Revenue rejected the county tax digest, and this is a bill that says very specifically, if in the year 2017 the tax commissioner rejects a county tax digest, and if in 2017 the county obtains a temporary consent order allowing the collection of taxes on an adjusted amount, that in that case, the taxpayers who received a benefit under that temporary collection order would continue to receive that benefit into the following year for 2018, so that it would essentially uphold those 2017 bills that people got last year and assure they would not get an additional bill, and that for 2018 they would be taxed at the 2017 level based on 2016. This bill sunsets 1/1 of 19. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
This is a general bill of statewide application.
Yes,
How
For
many-
all
how
the-
many, how many counties would it apply to, actually?
we believe it only applies to one because we're not aware of any other counties in which those two very unusual things happened in 2017.
Anybody else's tax digest got rejected in 2017?
But then again, in response to that, Mr. Chairman, this would only,
No, wait.
okay.
I've got a question from the chairman.
Mr. Chairman, is it not true that, following the lady's, bill, that I think the single county to which she's referring is the only county that has a temporary order allowing the collections within the time frame that the lady addresses in the legislation, and that is historic, therefore no one could get rejected and get a temporary order yesterday.
Okay. Any other questions? What's the pleasure of the committee? There's a mumbled motion to do pass.
I'll make it clear, move to pass.
All right, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Moves on to rules. House Bill 871, Representative LaRicchia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This House Bill 871, and we're working off of LC number 430877S, and I just now have the original copies of that substitute. And but what House Bill 870? Yes, sir.
Hold on a minute, Dominic. We're working off of 0891S, I think, which seems to be a more recent version.
Yes,
Is that correct?
yes, sir. That's, you are correct. I apologize.
Okay.
I got about 3 copies of it here in my folder. 0891S, and that was where they added that word seller, and then at the back, the 1.5 times. Okay. I apologize, but what this bill does, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this creates tax parity between manufactured and site-built homes. And the way that it does that is at the time of purchase, during the terms of the purchase, you will submit a T-234 form to the Clerk of Superior Court in the county where that house will preside. And when you do that, you're attaching or permanently affixing that manufactured home to real property, therefore becoming a real estate transaction. You will no longer pay an ad valorem tax in April and a real property tax in December. You will only pay one real property tax in December. The way that we create that tax parity is by exempting only 50% of the state portion of sales taxes. There'll be no local taxes exempted in this. It's only 50% of the state portion. And that puts manufactured housing more in line with what we do on site-built housing, paying sales and use tax on roughly 50 to 55% of the cost, which is the materials portion only. But you only get to do that if you permanently affix that what was tangible personal property of a manufactured home to real property with a T-234 form. And that's the short and sweet of it.
Is the bottom line on this is that this tax exemption is available to somebody who affixes their mobile home, manufactured home, permanently to the real estate, so it qualifies as real estate, surrenders their title so it's no longer considered personalty, and it applies basically to only new manufactured homes.
Only new manufacturers. It will not exempt any taxes off of the ones that are not permanently affixed to real property.
Okay. Chairman Martin.
But, Mr. Chairman, directed to the author of the bill and the chair, if I could, didn't we exempt inputs into manufactured homes from sales tax, either partially or wholly, at some time in the past, because there was a sales tax paid on them when they were purchased? Do I recall that correctly?
Yes, they qualify for a manufacturer's tax exemption on the purchase of materials at the manufacturer.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get at here is the reason we did that is because we do that in many cases in Georgia. You don't pay tax on inputs because you charge full sales tax on the output.
No,
Just like when you build a stick-built home, if you will, I think is what you were calling it. You pay full sales tax on all the sticks and bricks that go in it, but it becomes ad valorem taxable at that point. It seems like we're creating a disparity here in that we're not charging sales tax on the pieces, parts to go in, and then we're giving a sales tax exemption. I would support either one, but both of them seems to be having one's cake and eating it too.
Okay, I'll
Am
respond.
I missing something there?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll
Okay.
respond. What creates the tax parity is currently in Georgia that when you have real property, it is exempt from sales and use tax. When the manufacturer builds the home, they will still pay sales and use tax on 65% of the value of the home under this bill. About 50% of the cost of that home is materials only. So what we're doing is creating tax parity because on a site-built home, you do not pay taxes on the labor, the profit, the service, and that. You only pay sales and use tax on the materials. So that's how we're creating parity, just by reducing 2 pennies of the state portion only, no local sales taxes, and it gets that in line with site-built homes and what they pay. But again, if they do not go through the process of converting that, what was tangible personal property, into real property, then they do not qualify for this sales tax exemption. But they still will pay, in either scenario, a full state, they'll pay a state sales and use tax and local tax on 65% if it qualifies under real property, but they pay 100% if they do not permanently affix it to real property, thereby converting it to a real estate transaction.
I see the gentleman's point. You've gotten me closer to it. I still don't see that it's exact parity, but I don't have the numbers, so I won't. It's much closer than I thought it was.
Right. It's not exact. They actually gave about a 5 to 8% cushion on the manufactured housing side. They went to 65% because in site built and manufactured, the number's about 50% is materials only. But since they are a qualified manufacturer, they did not ask for a 50% sales tax reduction. They only asked for a 35%.
Still not sure I buy the numbers.
Representative Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative LaRicchia, could I just ask you to qualify real quick if this is the same LC version that we heard and passed out of sub, and if not, just what the difference is?
It is, but we were working off of just a fresh printed out copy of that sub, and what they did was on line 19, you'll see there where it says the seller shall complete the requirements. We added that word seller on this one, and then if you flip to the back, we wanted more of a penalty for people that might try to game that little process. And rather than just paying the sales tax that they owe, we added 1.5 times on line 21, 1.5 times the amount of tax exempted by this paragraph if they submit that form and go through the process and
Thank you.
discover that it's not permanently affixed.
Thank you.
Representative Williamson.
Thank you to the author of the bill. Is it not true you've worked pretty hard on this issue over a couple of years?
Yes, sir.
And it's not further true that I was 100% against it when you first started that effort.
Yes, sir.
Well, you've convinced me, and I think you made a compelling argument in the subcommittee about the parity that's been addressed by this measure. My follow-up question was exactly what Representative Blackman just asked, is on the compliance piece of the puzzle. Are these, is the entire tax withheld, collected, and then returned, or are you going to only be collecting the 2 cents at the time of the sale?
The way that it's worded in the bill is that you will be collecting the full local tax amount, and only on the state portion of the tax, it's on 50% of the value of the home. If it's a $100,000 home, you only apply the state sales tax to 50% of that, and then you get a certified copy of that T-234 form back to keep in your file. And when those retailers remit those sales taxes to the Department of Revenue, they remit it accordingly. A lot of those homes will still be paid 100%, and some will have the state sales tax exemption.
Just a follow-up question.
Yes, sir.
I'm just getting back to the compliance piece. So if there were any kind of misbehavior by the seller,
Yes,
the
sir.
seller's the one that bears the brunt of the, has to remit the balance of the taxes plus the penalty.
Plus the penalty, yes, sir.
Thank you. It's a good measure.
Any other questions? What's the pleasure of the committee? All right, any discussion? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Thank you.